magic words, an incantation, something presto change-o poof, and 2020 is over. Thankfully, we don't have to do incantations or spells. That's going to happen in a few days of its own accord. I'm glad for the passage of time this particular month. I have a friend in Spokane, Washington, a student of Unity. He's also a high school teacher, and David likes to collect shirts with thought-provoking sayings to kind of nudge his students a little, open conversations so that he can share some truth with them from his perspective now and again. So I sometimes get a text with his latest shirt acquisition. A few weeks ago, it was a black shirt, 2020, 5 stars, like on Amazon, but only one of them blacked out. And the comment, very bad, would not recommend. That sort of sums up some of what we might think about this year. His latest one that he sent me had a picture of the car from Back to the Future. And it said, Marty, whatever you do, don't go back to 2020. So we don't have to do much for the end of the year to come. But in Unity, we prepare with year-end or year-beginning reflection. We prepare for the act of release that the Daily Word message spoke of today. That process of denying that something, like a year or a pandemic, or someone, name anybody, fill in the blank, has any power over us, can separate us from our good. We release those false ideas because the power rests within us. And as we let go, we know we are preparing the ground for that which we choose. And that process is through affirmations, as Cindy shared at the opening. We speak powerful words of truth because that vibration sets that truth into motion in our life. Both of these acts we'll experience on Thursday evening. The burning bowl is a ritual of release, and the letters to God is the powerful claiming of the intention we hold for this coming year. We know that we are powerful, dynamic, and spiritual beings, and these practices help us center in that truth. Remind us that we belong in the realm of God, not the world of human affairs and human effects. That we are living from the consciousness of the Christ within. So my goal today is to help remind us of these truths and to establish the strongest foundation on which to come to these important sacraments on Thursday evening. Whether you join us here in the chapel or you're here at home, you can participate through the act of release and intention with us as we say goodbye to 2020 and we welcome 2021 with great hope, knowing that we seed the ground of our future. Throughout Scripture, there are countless, I didn't count them, so countless references to the power of the Word, the power of our spoken creativity. Proverbs 18:21, the power of life and death are in the tongue. Now that might seem alarming, but let's take the perspective of how empowering that statement is. We hold the truth of creation or extinguishing in our life, of drawing to the good that God has abundantly all around us and saying no thank you to that which does not serve our highest good. But I don't know about you, but I find I am still trying to learn the lesson of paying attention to the power of my words. That having learned to speak very early on, sometimes even fluently, creatively, tactfully, blessedly, I may not have always been taught that the power of my word is so much more than simple language. It's not about vocabulary and sentence structure alone. Thank God. Because when I was in 7th grade English, I was just undone by sentence structuring, sentence diagramming. Anybody else hated that in English? Yeah. I aggravated my 7th grade teacher so much because I couldn't countenance days and days of sentence diagramming that she finally threw her hands up about 2 weeks into this new school year, and my correction was to be shifted over to the advanced English class. I'm still trying to work out if that was a gift or exactly what. Karma does eventually play out in our lives, because early in my adult life, I found myself in a position of being a director and an instructor in a business instruction school, what we used to call secretarial training. Guess what you teach in business English? Diagramming. So it was good that I had sort of overcome my response to that and was now ready for that. And now I coach homiletics, the very specific art of languaging sermons. So yes, it's a thank you to Mrs. Spencer, my 7th grade teacher, all those months ago. Sadly, Mrs. Spencer in 7th grade, nor anyone in any other grade, taught me that there is a great and fundamental difference between my casual use of words and the causal use of words. Casual, sort of what we all employ every day. Causal, when we are working with intention and the power and presence of spirit that guides our language. Having discovered this principle as an adult, that words are a creative medium, well, I'm still working on unlearning old language habits and relearning the power of my spoken word. For all of us, as we come to this year-end and year-beginning process, how we apply the spiritual practices of releasing and affirming, we need some tools, perhaps, to remind us daily that the power of the word is God's gift of causal language. No more than John 1:1 in Scripture is this made clear, for the verse reads, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God." Now, John is the most overtly metaphysical of the Gospels. It doesn't talk so much about the life and the happenings of the man Jesus of Nazareth, but it shares with us the immense journey and the expression of the Christ principle. The infinite spiritual power that Jesus came to embody and to demonstrate for us, that he is not the exception to the rule of humanity, but that he is the great example. This is made clear from the very first verses of this Gospel of John that deliberately echo the beginning of Genesis and present a newer and more relevant to the time of Jesus understanding that those words were about the entire process of creation. An example for us, a pattern for us to follow. The word, the light that shines in the darkness, that's the Christ principle. And where are we to find that? If you choose, place your hand on your heart in recognition that you are that Christ principle. You are the very essence of that living, loving God, inhabiting your body, living your life in this period of time. Jesus was one who came fully into the Christ expression, an example of the potential that each of us holds. When we understand the Word to be the Christ then the truth of our spiritual oneness with God becomes evident. And the passage may bring us to awareness that all that God is, we hold in potential in our own heart and mind. Another deeper point of understanding in this verse is about the word beginning. It's not so much a point in time, which is how it often gets understood or translated, but the original word also holds the meaning in principio, in principle. So the translation is more accurate for us to understand that in the beginning means here's the foundation, here's our starting point, here's the frame of reference for how we move forward in this process of utilizing the Logos, the Word that was God. So when we put it in terms that we can use right now, today, it says to us that the Word is the source of our being. It's the creative center of our life. It's the still point from which we become the outlet of God into the world. You are an outlet from this fundamental, basic understanding, basic consciousness of oneness that is actually the centered truth of your being, the deepest truth of who you are. And our words, your words, my words, they're the visible outlet of a creative flow from within us that is connected to that one source, to that living, loving essence, which is the root process of creation in the universe. That word is of God. That word created all in our experience and all that will ever come to be created, and we hold that source in the midst of our own being. So our words then become the outpouring of this consciousness, this awareness, this alignment with God itself. Doesn't that sort of make us think that we ought to pay a little bit more attention to what we speak in every moment, every day? Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote, "Every man is the inlet we receive and may become the outlet we extend forth all that there is in God." All that there is in God. Neither in Scripture nor in the wisdom of Emerson does it say, well, you got a little bit today, but, don't be thinking yourself too big because you don't have it all. You do have it all within in potential. And we are forever learning this lesson in our life, that what God is, we are. What God is, I am. Repeat that to yourself in the stillness of your heart and allow it to reach your mind. What God is, I am. Now, the problem we humans have is we simply trip ourselves up on the way to being godlets. We get lost in the human stuff that confronts us, that we're contending with, that we're living with day to day. We speak in a gazillion ways about all the things that, not for the life of us, do we want to show up and experience. And yet, we then wonder, so how did I get here? How am I standing in this place I'm standing in? How is it that my job is so unsatisfying? How is it that I am facing a huge health issue? How has my relationship fallen apart? In some way, we've been the author of every place we stand in our life. Again, alarming or empowering. We get to choose, because the only thing that matters is where we are right now. And what steps do we take next? How do we move forward? Well, part of that toolkit is using this logos, this creative energy, this power of our spoken word. And not haphazardly. I'm still working to get refined and let go of those bad habits. Because whether it's intentional or haphazard, abracadabra, we create when we speak. Thankfully, in this process of sometimes speaking what we really don't want to have happen, we get to experience grace. In fact, our speech is often proof to me that grace, this unworked for blessing of God, exists, because I am so thankful that I don't have to live with everything that ever showed up and came in my mind or came out of my mouth. That I am rescued from my own self, my own limited abilities to be that Christ principle. Another misstep, we make a series of missteps. Sometimes, here's one of my greatest ones. I make a joke frequently about just exactly what I don't want to have. But if I make that joke repeatedly enough and over enough time, I may imbue the joke with the energy to create it in my experience. Perhaps we indulge in self-deprecating, self-defeating, or self-limited self-talk, those internal messages that just sort of talk ourselves into circles. And one I have some experience with is we bargain with God. Oh, God, if you'll just do this for me, then I'll do that for you, or I'll give up this for you. In the category of it's often easier to see the lesson play out in someone else's life. A few decades ago, my sister-in-law, who was a cancer survivor at quite a young age, in her mid-30s, she had an occurrence of breast cancer and was treated successfully and went on to do volunteer work in the cancer community with other cancer survivors, nurturing them and guiding them through the difficult early days. And so she told her story of her own journey over and over, how in the depth of her fear, in the early stage for her, that she promised God she would do anything if he just let her live to see her children, young at this point, to see her young children grow up and get married. And I was very proud, if you will, of my sister-in-law and the work she did in the cancer community, because we have a number of circumstances of cancer in my family. And I love to hear her stories, because she could tell them with such great humor and such passion and such feeling arising out of her own experience. Well, fast forward a decade or so, my husband and I had been in here, Honolulu, when I still lived on the mainland. We had come to Honolulu with this family because the youngest of my sister-in-law and brother-in-law, that couple, their second child and son was getting married here in Honolulu, and we were invited to come with a very few members of the family to be here to celebrate together, to enjoy that. When we got home, a few days later, we got a phone call. And my sister-in-law is explaining how when she got home from Canada, she hadn't really been feeling all that well, so she went straight to her doctor. And the diagnosis and the prognosis were not what anyone wanted to hear. It was terminal, and there did not seem to be an advanced, aggressive, and no course of treatment available. And as she was describing that, the conversation I'd heard many times, if God just lets me live to see my children married, kept playing in my mind. And I wonder, in her intention for good with that story, did she somehow seed her future? Oh, that's more than I can know. But I do know that the power of our spoken word is a forceful tool when we use it for good, when we use it appropriately, when we direct it from the presence of Spirit. I bless my sister-in-law, Jan, as she dances in the cosmos. Her life has been full of lessons for my own. And this story and all of what's preceded holds the key difference that Jesus understood, that there is no separation between his life and God. And so there is no separation between our lives lived and God. There was no Jesus talk that was different from God talk. In fact, he said, in essence, the words I speak are not my words, but the words of him who sent me. So this is the key. Jesus wasn't speaking about his own ideas. He spoke from the wisdom that God instructed him to share and teach. The key for us is deepening our own power of words, not from the human mind, not from our ego, not from our need to satisfy self, but anchoring our words as deeply as we can into that essence of God. And so what we speak comes forth from a place of truth so deep that it is that causal and creative power. It is the divine logos manifesting through us. When Jesus was demonstrating the principle of the power of the word that came through him, but from God, Scripture tells of a very specific process. As the story of the raising of Lazarus unfolded, Scripture says that Jesus looked to the heavens. Well, there's an error right there in Scripture, because what Jesus said over and over, the only place to look for the kingdom of heaven is within your own heart, within your own being. So I think the Scripture would say, or, should, just because I'll take a little rewriting license, Jesus looked within. He looked to that kingdom of heaven that holds this creative power, this creative force, and he looked away from the experience that was in front of him. He said no to the power of the effects in the human world. He looked away, and he got himself centered and in tune with the realization that he was the creative expression of this infinite power. He got himself totally out of the way and allowed this divine logos, the creative principle, to be expressed and articulated through his own words. And so the power flowed through his words, through his accomplishment, through the raising of Lazarus, to accomplish everything that he intended. The word went to where Jesus sent it, to the tomb, to the darkness, and with simple words, Lazarus came forth. Not because Jesus was so electrifying, a charismatic being. I mean, look at him in that robe, how nice he looked, in that flowing hair. And I do like a good beard on a gentleman. It is not about the personality and the ego mind, the human self of Jesus. No, it was this divine energy that he held so clearly in the center of his being that his words, when invoked, came from him who sent Jesus into the world. He spoke with a definite spiritual authority. The words of Isaiah tell us clearly how this works. The writer is talking about the snow and the rain nourishing the seeds to come into fruition. And verse 11 says, "So will my message be that goes out of my mouth. It won't return to me empty. Instead, it will accomplish what I desire and achieve the purpose for which I sent it." The words of my mouth go forth to accomplish what I intend. So we're not saying a lot of things because saying them makes them true. This is not any sort of metaphysical abracadabra, some magic words that we come up with that accomplish great things. It's not the repetition of our affirmations. No. When we are appropriately employing this power of the creative word, we are so deeply centered in the Christ principle within, connected to the flow of God through our lives, through our being, that those words are empowered with the creative force. Not the words themselves, but the energy with which we speak, the connectedness to the oneness that is God. The God is that tells me I am. So we want to explore exactly how to be in that place, yes? So that we can have access to this creative power. Well, you probably won't be surprised to hear me say that spending daily time in prayer and meditation is how we anchor ourselves in the Christ principle, in the movement of God in our own life. I have a friend on the mainland who was quite disturbed by the whole flow of the last 9 months. And she happened onto a practice that is working for her to center herself in the midst of the upheaval, not to look out there at what's going on, but to look inward. And so the first 30 minutes of her day, she spends 10 minutes in quiet reflection, meditation. She listens to the source speak to her. And then whatever has arisen as she listened, then for the next 10 minutes, she speaks words of truth, affirmations, claiming what she knows to be true at the deepest level, not in the level of what's out here in the world, but at that deepest level of God's holy essence. And then she spends 10 minutes in movement, some sort of exercise. 30 minutes each day, treating spirit, meditation, mind, affirmation, and body movement, so that she can stay in this balanced place in her life in the midst of whatever is going on. So we need to find ourselves these practices that work for us, that keep us centered, finding our equilibrium balanced in the presence of Spirit. Then we can choose to focus on what we see in the news, what's going on in our relationships, how the job is going or isn't going, but we don't have to be stuck in any of that which we identify as not working in our life. We can move into the place where we stand in this truth of the divine realm of creativity. We get to choose each day, each moment, what power we will serve, that which moves us forward or that which constricts and extinguishes the light of our dreams. When we find a way to stay centered in God, connected to the source and empowered by the divine logos, we may not always be able to do it right then, right now, but we can find a practice that moves us into that connectivity. It can be as simple as our breath, the meditation that arose earlier, breathing into a simple truth that we are the manifest essence of God, and knowing that we are sending forth our word to do as we wish, knowing it will work for us in the world of effect as it comes forth from the realm of God within. So the practice is to know that I create when I listen and then I speak. With this deeper understanding that when we speak, we create worlds. We create the world of our own life. Then we may choose with wisdom and purpose. Wisdom and purpose when we listen to call forth a Lazarus experience in our own life. To call forth the highest and best in us, as us, through us. So we speak with the presence of the indwelling Christ, so that we may become and live as the outlet of God in the world, right here, right now, becoming godlets and creatively speaking the life we wish to live in the world we desire to live in. Namaste. Aloha.